Today, we're stepping inside the Delhi High Court to look at a 2007 case that did so much more than just settle a family dispute. It actually changed the game for how Indian law handles money and divorce. This is Alok Kumar Jain versus Purnima Jain, a landmark battle over temporary financial support, and it's the story of how one court managed to forge a clear path through a very, very personal storm. You know, every case like this, at its heart, is about people. So the court started by hearing from the wife, Purnima Jain, and her lawyer painted a picture of a family really struggling on the brink. And right there, that single statement just lays out the human stakes of this whole legal battle. You've got a mother, she's caring for two kids, and one of them has some pretty serious medical needs. So this plea, it's not just about money. It's about trying to secure a family's well-being while everything is up in the air.
So what exactly was she asking for? Well, the request was pretty substantial. We're talking 2 lakh rupees every single month for temporary support, plus a one-time payment of 11 lakh rupees to cover her daughter's medical care. And those numbers, right there, they really set the stage for the conflict that was about to unfold.
Okay, so you might be wondering why such a high amount? Well, the wife's entire claim was basically built on the husband's ability to pay. He was a senior manager at a big company working abroad in Abu Dhabi. So the argument was simple, right? He has the money, he can provide this level of support. But that was only one side of the story. Because the husband, he came back with a completely different story about their finances. And this, right here, is where the core conflict of the case just absolutely ignites. And there you have it, the classic courtroom dilemma. One person is claiming they're in desperate need. The other is claiming, no, she's hiding the facts. She has plenty of money. So how on earth does a judge figure out the truth in this kind of he said, she said situation? Well, the husband's lawyer then dropped an absolute bombshell. He accused his wife of having already withdrawn 56 lakh rupees from their joint accounts. That directly challenged her whole story of being financially helpless. And he wasn't done. He added that right before he left for Abu Dhabi, he had deposited his own terminal benefits, that's 27 lakh rupees, into that very same joint account, specifically for her and the kids. So his point was crystal clear. She already had access to a ton of money that he had provided. So now you have two completely opposing stories. And the focus shifts, right? It moves away from the personal drama and lands squarely on the judge, Justice Pradeep Nandrajog. The question is, how would the court possibly navigate these murky waters to find a fair solution? I mean, really think about it. When both sides have these compelling but totally contradictory claims, what tools does a court even have to figure out what's fair? This is the exact legal puzzle that this case set out to solve. The key legal tool here is something called interim maintenance, which comes from Section 24 of the Hindu Marriage Act. Now, what's really important to get about this is its purpose. This isn't about the final division of assets or anything like that. It's temporary support designed to make sure one spouse, usually the one with less money, isn't put at a huge disadvantage while the whole legal mess is ongoing. And Justice Nandrajog, in his judgment, he really made this philosophy crystal clear. He said, the law is meant to be helpful, sure, but its purpose isn't charity. It's about fairness. It's about leveling the playing field so that both people can actually fight their case without being financially crippled. So to get to that fairness, the court didn't just rely on guesswork or sympathy. Nope. Instead, it laid out a structured approach that has since become a cornerstone of Indian family law, and that is the 7-factor test. So the court laid out these 7 specific things to look at. First, the status of the parties. Then, the reasonable wants of the person asking for support. And of course, you have to look at their own income. The court also weighs the husband's obligations, like how many other people he has to support, and his own debts. But crucially, it also considers the lifestyle the family was used to living, and finally, the husband's actual capacity to pay. It's this incredibly comprehensive checklist designed to leave no stone unturned. But the framework didn't stop with just the checklist. The court also added some ground rules to make the whole thing work. It insisted that both sides had to be completely honest about their finances, full disclosure. If it seemed like someone was hiding something, the court said it could use reasonable guesswork. And maybe most importantly, those suspicious large withdrawals, like that 56 lakhs we talked about earlier, yeah, those had to be explained.
So what's the big deal? What is the lasting impact of this one case from 2007? Let's zoom out a little bit and look at its true legacy in Indian family law.
The main thing to take away from Alok Kumar Jain versus Purnima Jain is this. It created a predictable, fair process. It basically took the decision about maintenance away from the subjective feelings of a judge and moved it towards an objective, structured analysis that could be used again and again in case after case.
And, this judgment didn't just appear out of nowhere. It was a really key moment in a much bigger evolution. I mean, look at how much happened in 2007 alone. The Bharat Hedge case set up the basic principles, and then just months later, this case, Alok Kumar Jain, it crystallized them into that clear 7-factor test. And that foundation was then built on years later by the Kusum Sharma guidelines, creating a standard process for courts all across the country.
At the end of the day, this whole legal framework is trying to strike this incredibly delicate balance, a balance between fairness for the spouse who's in need, the cold, hard financial realities of both people, and the dignity of everyone involved. But it does leave us with a pretty profound question. Can any structured formula, no matter how fair it seems, ever truly capture the complex, messy, and deeply human needs of a family in crisis?